one of the points I make in the book is that presidential cabinets for the vast majority of American history were just all white men. And when that was going on, nobody said, identity politics, like only white men are being chosen for this. But then if somebody comes out and says, I think we need a cabinet that looks like America, or a cabinet that is 50% female, or whatever it might be, that all of a sudden is identity politics. So to your question about whether or not—
I agree with that critique.
Right. So this is why I'm saying that
not your critique. I agree with the point.
One?
I agree with the point that it is more identity politics to suggest today that we ought to, that in today's politics, forget about 60 years ago, I agree that it was unspoken white identitarianism to have only white males at the cabinet table. Agreed. Today, if somebody says, two policies. One is whoever is most qualified gets into the cabinet. Somebody else says, I need a transgender person on this to pick my Secretary of Education, as Senator Warren recently sort of suggested. The secondary claim is to me significantly more disturbing than the meritocracy claim, no matter where things come down. Do you have any preference?
I want to hold for a minute on the first question, then I'll go to your second question, which is, my point is simply that identity politics has always been part of America.
Right, but it was kind of bad.
It's very powerful.
And it was bad.
And I don't think you're going to get it out of the whole thing, because people interact through not just the political system, but the world through their identities.
But it's one of the worst things that has happened in American history, is the unspoken white identitarianism.
I agree that it has terrible dimensions, and I agree that it has, or maybe I don't agree, but I believe it can have good dimensions. Like everything in politics, it's complicated, and it can go in multiple directions depending on who's doing it and whether or not the causes are going forward stand up to some basic analysis. I think in the general question of how to build cabinets that you're bringing up there, oftentimes the way people see it is not actually that what they're doing is betraying the meritocracy by trying to make a more diverse cabinet, but actually forcing themselves to be meritocratic in building something, and also creating a world where you can be meritocratic in the future. If you've created a system where it's endlessly white privilege regenerating itself through, then it becomes very hard to have a system 20 years from now where there are enough people who've come up through the pipeline and have had their needs recognized and have had their talents seen to be able to have the kind of system that we want to have. I think one of the places that I probably disagree— hold on. I think one of the places I probably disagree with you pretty profoundly in politics has to do with what do you do about historical injustice now? I think sometimes there's an effort to say, I call it sort of zero-day equality, right? As of today, things are equal. And so as of today, everything goes in the same direction. As of today, everybody gets treated equally. And then all the accumulated power, the accumulated wealth, the accumulated position in society, you just sort of wipe it away, and you hope people are going to swim through that entire thing. It's why I brought up earlier this question of an African-American family with a head earner and a full-time job having significantly less wealth than a white family with an unemployed head earner, or an African-American family with a college-educated head earner having a lot less wealth than a white family with a college dropout head earner. Like, that is something where you see that there's something going on in the background there, that if you simply begin running the race right now, it is not going to be a fair race. Now, you have to handle these things carefully. I don't think anything is easy, right? My background, as you know, is as a policy reporter. It is hard to fix difficult problems. Doesn't mean you shouldn't try, or doesn't mean you shouldn't see them as problems.
Well, you can see historical injustice as a problem and still recognize the limitations of government, which goes back to one of your original statements about kind of the nature of liberalism, optimism about the ability of government to get this stuff done. I mean, Lyndon Johnson specifically talked about kind of moving toward a Rawlsian equality of opportunity as opposed to the sort of equality of rights that is guaranteed under the Constitution, or should be, right? The idea that equal rights before law and equal application of the law was the basis of Americanism, and he sort of replaced that, speaking clearly, with this idea that that it was not a fair race if somebody was starting off 10 yards behind, which is a nice metaphor.
Or hundreds of yards
behind, or 1,000 yards behind. Mm-hmm. And that's a nice metaphor, and that's true to the extent that it's true. There's only a couple of problems.
It is true.
Well, when I say it's true to the extent that it's true, what I mean is that there are a couple of problems with it. One, everybody in society, to a more or less extent, is born different from everybody else in society with certain advantages and certain disadvantages. And that's accurate. Also, everybody is born either with a certain advantage or disadvantage in terms of historical circumstance. What makes you believe that either it is right and just for the government to then come in and act as a sort of godlike figure in figuring out who deserves to have something taken away from them and handed to somebody else, even if they don't necessarily bear personal responsibility for it?
Well, it's not a godlike figure. It's a democratic figure, right? It's a figure that is imbued with the powers we give it through consent.
But you don't believe, do you believe in pure majoritarianism? I mean, do you believe that
I'm a lot closer to pure majoritarianism than where we are now.
I mean, that's pretty shocking given the history of the United States. Pure majoritarianism was greenlighting Jim Crow. Did you know that every like on this video creates one additional leftist tear gleaming in the sunshine? Don't ask me why. That's called science. To take advantage of this amazing opportunity, hit the like button.